sort of get goosebumps when I get to hang out with him, and I've been doing it for 20 years, and it's still fun for me. So let's do a little bit of an introduction. As we know, Stan Lee has influenced literally everybody in this building, not only in this room, but in this building in some fashion. There is something that he has created, touched, had some influence in that each one of us has either had in our hands or will have in our hands, or at least the inspiration of creating on any level will actually be a byproduct of Stan Lee's living legend and the character that he's done. And so without going into the obvious of what it is, let's bring out the man you've been waiting for, Mr. Stan Lee! Stan's partner, Gil Champion, part of POW Entertainment. He'll be answering a few questions too.
Todd, if you can't say something nice about somebody.
All right, Stan and I are going to have as much fun here.
And comics. I didn't know who, what department needed somebody, but a job is a job. I was 17 years old. So I went up there and I found out there was an opening in the comic book department. It wasn't a big department. It consisted of Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. And I walked in and I found out that my job was to be like, well, an office boy would have been too glamorous. I was some kind of, went down and got them sandwiches. I filled their inkwells. Stuff like that. They used ink in those days. And that's how I got started. So the only help that story will be to you is if any of you have a wife's cousin who has a publishing business and they're looking for something. That's about the best I can do.
And then so talk to us about getting regular work at that point, because besides being the gopher at the office to start with, at some point the trigger has to come that you have more value to them doing regular work than just being an office gopher. So what was some of the first work that you had?
I don't think they ever thought I had any better value. What happened is, now this is very technical, and it may be hard for some of you to grasp, so listen closely. In those days, every comic book publisher wanted his comic book to be called a magazine. Because if it was known as a magazine, they got a cheaper postal rate. So when they sent the books out to subscribers, it didn't cost as much. In order for it to be called a magazine, it had to have 2 pages of text. Not panels, 2 pages of writing. Now, nobody in those days who read a comic wanted to read 2 pages of text. Most of those people couldn't read anyway. So, somebody had to write the 2 pages of text. And since it was something that nobody read, they asked me to write it, because nobody was going to read it anyway. So my first job was writing 2 pages of text. And there I was, 17 years old. My story came out. It was a Captain America story, all in words, no panels, but it's said by Stan Lee. I want to tell you, I showed it to everybody. Look, I'm a writer. I'm a professional. But I couldn't say that too much because Joe Simon and Jack Kirby were saying, run down and get us our sandwiches. Anyway, that's how it started. And that was the question. I never remember his questions because he talks so much and he rambles. And so, I want to apologize. I wanted to get a real celebrity to do this. They all turned me down. No, I love this. I love this band. Okay, have fun with people you love.
So let's talk, Stan. For some of the people who don't know, although we all have grown up with the name Stan Lee, tell them about what your real name is, and because that's just a stage name, right? Let's break the magic here. Talk to them about your real name and why you changed it.
Notice how he talks. He used to be a baseball pitcher. Can't forget. Anyway, my name, I used to have a real name, not something silly like Stanley. It used to be Stanley Martin Lieber, a real name. And I used that all my life, but then when I started writing comics, people knew, the reason I signed Stan Lee was people had no respect for comics in those days. They didn't consider them an art form. They thought they was things that were read by dumb adults or moronic children, or nobody had any respect for comics. I'll tell you a story. I've told this before. If you've heard it before, read a book or something. It'll only take a couple of minutes. I would be at a party somewhere, and somebody would walk over to me and say, "What do you do?" I didn't want to tell them. So I'd say, "I'm a writer," and I'd walk away. But they'd follow me, because, see, I'm a very fascinating person, and they didn't know. And they would say, no, what do you write? I still tried to evade the question. I'd say, "I write things for kids," and I walked away. Well, what kind of things? Eventually, I had to say comic books. Then they would turn around and walk away, and I wouldn't see them again. Today, it's different. Today, somebody says, "Hey, isn't that Stan Lee over there? Excuse me, President Obama, I'll be back in a minute."